Hi everyone, my name's Adam Boynton, and today I'm going to be introducing you all to Jamf Threat Defense, our solution designed to help protect you, your mobile users, devices, and data from malicious intent. As I said, my name's Adam Boynton. I'm based out of London in the UK. I've worked for Wandera, now Jamf, for 6.5 years. When I joined Wandera in 2015, we were a company of roughly 25 employees, and I've seen us grow to just over 250 before the Jamf acquisition in July of this year. So for those that don't know Wandera, we were founded in 2012, born as a mobile company. Our solution was designed predominantly or initially to provide safe internet access and endpoint security for iOS and Android devices. We're recognized as leaders in mobile threat defense and have been for several years now. We also have additional products that are sitting within the zero trust network access space and the web filtering space. I know several colleagues of mine are talking about these respective products during the whole JNUC experience, so please do check them out. Prior to the acquisition from Jamf, we were a very successful company. We have customers like Santander, MasterCard, Ferrari, NATO, the UK government, all using the Wandera solution to protect their mobile devices from the different types of attacks that I'm going to be talking you through today. So why do we need a mobile threat defense solution in the first place? Now, one of the key trends that's driving this is the fact that users are obviously remote, and the COVID-19 pandemic has only accelerated this trend. So users now are working from anywhere, and ultimately using or accessing the data that they need to do for their jobs from different types of devices. I can probably do majority of my work, probably about 90% of my day-to-day function via my mobile device. I have access to my email, my CRM system, my expense application, even intranet or internal applications. I can access this all via my mobile device. So users are remote, and that's going to increase, and we're relying more and more on our mobile devices. In addition to that, we have applications which are everywhere, predominantly in the cloud. More and more data now is accessed via SaaS services, which ultimately is accelerated again by the use of mobile devices. I'm sure those of you that are listening to this session have had your users or your employees come to you requesting to have access to a certain application or to use a certain application on their mobile device for their daily function. So this is kind of where we're seeing the kind of increase in mobile attacks and why we're seeing the increase in mobile attacks. Because users are using these devices more than they ever have done. They're accessing more data on these devices more than they ever have done. Yet compare them to the rest of your endpoints where you maybe have invested years and also thousands of dollars in protecting them. Mobile is relatively kind of a weak area. So that's why hackers are targeting these devices. Now, where are they targeting these devices, and are they getting any kind of success with this? So at Jamf, we split the different types of threats that we see on mobile devices into two areas. So we have on-device threats and we have in-network threats. Now, with the on-device threats, the first thing to look at and consider is configuration vulnerabilities. Now, I'm sure we are all familiar with Apple and ultimately Android as well, releasing updates to their OSs quite frequently. And a lot of the time, these updates are to do with performance or for latest features. But equally, a lot of the time, these updates are due to vulnerabilities that have been fixed or patched because they've been identified as an area of weakness or potentially a security threat. Hackers are continually looking to target the way in which the device is set up and configured. And ultimately, we need to be, as users, aware of this and making sure that we are always running the latest version of these OSs. You only have to look recently, just this month, in September 2021, where Apple were very quick to push out an update of iOS 14.8, which we'll talk more about later on in this session, actually. But that was a big kind of push to get users running the latest OS purely for a security reason. So we know there are vulnerabilities in actually the way the device is configured and set up, albeit it is a very secure platform. Then we look at the applications that users are using or accessing. Now, generally, what we see amongst our customers is that there is a corporate-owned, personally enabled device ownership model when it comes to applications. So a lot of organizations maybe own the device, but generally speaking, they allow the users to install whatever applications they wish. And that most of the time isn't an issue because both Apple and Google do a very good job at vetting these applications to ensure that only genuine, legitimate, and secure applications make it onto their app stores. However, that isn't always the case. Just in 2019, Wandera discovered there were 27 different applications which had malware embedded within them on the genuine iOS App Store. We also know that there are certain applications which ultimately aren't as created equal compared to other applications when it comes to the security of the application itself. For example, we see a lot of applications which are inadvertently leaking their users' data. In 2018, we discovered the British Airways app, sorry, I always struggle to get that one out, was not encrypting its users' credit card information at the payment part within the application. Now, what that meant is if a user was connected to an insecure Wi-Fi network when using that particular application, their credit card information was being sent in clear text. Obviously, quite a significant security issue when that was discovered. We also find there are a number of applications which, albeit are genuine in terms of their use, but maybe they have overarching privileges or access to certain parts of your data or device which maybe you're not comfortable with. To give you another example of this, we discovered a couple of years ago now that the La Liga application, and those who aren't familiar with La Liga, it is the Spanish Football Association, or soccer for my American friends. What we discovered was this application, when a user installed it on their device, it requested access to both the microphone and to the location. Now, this is pretty standard stuff. When you install an application onto a device, it normally asks for a set of permissions. Most of the time as users, we just click allow and allow without really kind of thinking about what they're using those for. Now, what this application was doing, however, was when a user walked into a bar, that location information then triggered the application to switch the microphone on the device. That then allowed the application to listen in to its surroundings. And what they were doing is they were listening to whether the bar was playing the football game. And then they were able to cross-reference, does this bar have a license to play this football game, or are they illegally streaming this match? So actually pretty clever in terms of what they were doing and how they were kind of clamping down on this issue they had. But at the same time, if they have the ability to listen in to whether I'm watching a football game, what's stopping them from listening into a personal conversation or a confidential business meeting? And there are a number of applications which unfortunately do request access to this type of this part of the device, which ultimately we should not really be too comfortable with. Then we have infrastructure attacks. So this is where hackers are looking to exploit that always connected nature of the mobile device. I'm sure everyone listening to this session would not go to a local coffee shop, jump onto the insecure Wi-Fi network there and start sending lots of sensitive information. However, these devices that we are using, our mobile devices, they are designed to always be connected and they're always looking to connect. So unfortunately, a lot of these man-in-the-middle attacks happen without the user actually realizing they've happened in the first place. All an attacker or a hacker has to do to get you to connect to one of these man-in-the-middle Wi-Fi networks is to give it the same name or an SSID as a previous Wi-Fi network you've joined in the past. And ultimately, if your device recognizes that Wi-Fi network or the SSID, it will jump onto it automatically. Your phone could be in your pocket when this takes place, and you may not realize. If you don't get your phone out and start browsing the internet, that traffic's going via a man-in-the-middle attack without you realizing. So a growing concern to a lot of our customers, albeit in the last 18 months or so, there's been less of these type of attacks because users have been working from home. But as we start to return to the kind of sort of day-to-day and traveling in between either meetings or traveling sort of in between into the office, we have seen already a slight increase in these types of attacks taking place again. Then we have the in-network threats. Now, we're going to spend a little bit of time on phishing, so I won't talk about it too much at this point, but phishing is the #1 mobile threat. It's not just us that believe that, it's kind of widely considered to be the case in the industry. Now, this is both because of the prevalence of phishing attacks on mobile. To give you an idea, we see a new phishing site is created or accessed every 20 seconds by one of our customers. but also the severity as well. Verizon did a study of all the data breaches that took place in 2019. 95% of them started with a phishing attack. So not only are these attacks a very common occurrence, but they also have very significant implications. So we'll certainly be talking about that in more detail in a second. And then we have network-based risks. So this is what happens when the device is actually infected. Where is this malware or malicious application communicating to and from? Is it sort of sending traffic to a command and control server? Is it trying to download further malicious activity or content to the device? But also just general browsing activity as well. If users are visiting websites which aren't in line with your company policy, then ultimately there are security risks associated with that as well. So this is kind of the mobile sort of threat spectrum, if you like, and we'll focus on a few of these in isolation. So like I said, we're going to look at phishing to start with. Now, we actually have this tool at Wandera. You can see the URL on the screen here. For those that sort of want to check this out, I would certainly encourage this. It's essentially a test or a kind of a quiz, as the name alludes to, which allows you to kind of analyze genuine and phishing sites and genuine and phishing messages on a mobile device, and test yourself to see whether you would have detected them, picked it up, or whether you might have accidentally clicked on one of these links. So great to kind of have if you have 5 minutes yourself just to play around with, but also if you want to share this with sort of employees or colleagues to kind of test their skill at detecting these, I would certainly recommend checking this out. So at Wandera, or now Jamf, we have a tool which allows us to replicate these phishing attacks. Now, if I kind of just move it along here, this is going to play for you. So this tool, as you can see, this is something I recorded earlier, allows me to mimic different types of phishing attacks. In this case, I'm going to do a Dropbox phishing attack. So in order for me to do this, all I need to do is know the SMS number or the mobile number of my, let's say, victim, if you like. So very kind of easy to launch this attack. How easy is it to get hold of someone's mobile number? Or you could send it to a load of random users, but a lot of the time we're seeing these as targeted attacks. It also allows me to customize the actual body of the message. So I'm going to send a message here to someone pretending to be Dropbox, and it's going to encourage them to check out some files on Wandera. So you can see now on the screen on the right, this is a mobile device that I click on that link from Dropbox, and it takes me through to this Dropbox page. I'm going to input some credentials. Don't worry, these aren't my genuine credentials for those that are taking note. But I'm going to just log in, and as you can see, I'm putting in quite a secure password here. Well, secure by the definition of there's lots of characters, there's even a few numbers and letters included in there. Now, what you can now see on the Hackers Console is that username and password has presented itself. Back to the mobile device, it's also asking me for a two-factor authentication code, which typically is generated by a third-party app. And that in itself has also been sent through to the Hackers Console. So now, within this Hackers Console, I've got that user's username, password, and two-factor authentication code to access their Dropbox account, which, let's face it, probably has a lot of sensitive information within that account itself. But also, I now have that user's username and password. And as much as we hate to admit it, most users are most likely sharing login details for different services that they use. So this is very valuable information that I've just got, all through a simple text message that I've sent to users. Now, we are, as users now, used to receiving text messages from services that we use. And oftentimes it's genuine. If I get a text from my bank when I've made a new payment, I know that it's come from them. If I get a text from Dropbox, occasionally that is a genuine text message because it's maybe an alternative form of authentication, or maybe it's just an update to tell me that a file has changed or whatever it might be. So if a user receives a text message from Dropbox, they're not instantly questioning it, or at least most users aren't. So it's very difficult for users to know if this is a genuine or indeed a phishing message that's just being sent to them. And then once they click on that link, as you saw through that particular example there, it's very easy for hackers to kind of mimic or replicate these mobile sites to make them look genuine. So like I said, there is a clear reason why mobile phishing is the number one threat vector, and hopefully this kind of short example has given you insight into why that is the case. So thankfully, Jamf Threat Defense exists to solve these challenges and protect against these threats. Now, we split out the different types of protection we provide into 3 areas. So we provide on-device security, which is protecting against device-based threats and vulnerabilities, including malware and just general OS vulnerabilities. We then provide internet security, which protects you from these web-borne cyber threats, which includes phishing attacks, data leaks, you name it. And then we also have conditional access, which we can provide natively or through integrations with services like Microsoft, where we can feed our risk intelligence into whether a user can or cannot access sensitive data or sensitive applications. Now, how do we do this? Now, I won't go into our architecture in too much detail, purely because we have sessions at JNUC where my colleagues are really diving into the Wandera solution in a little bit more detail. But ultimately, it consists of these 3 layers. So we have an application that we install on the device. The application is responsible for the on-device detection and response. Think of the application the same way you think of an antivirus client that you install on your desktops, laptops. So it's responsible for scanning the device for malware, for misconfigurations, and any sort of vulnerabilities within the OS or the application itself. We also have the added advantage of it being an app. It allows us to communicate and educate the end users. So via the app, users can see a report of any security incidents or events that are taking place on their device. It can also be used to send through notifications to users. So if I, as a user, click on a phishing link, I'll get a notification straight away that will tell me that's a phishing link. If I need to update my OS, I'll get a notification to update my OS. So the application does serve an important function, not just from a security point of view, but also an educational point of view as well. Then we have our security cloud. Now, traffic is routed to the security cloud through 2 main methods. We can either send traffic via a forward proxy to a cloud gateway, or we can operate simply as a DNS server on the device. Both allow you to achieve the same outcome, which is blocking these web threats. So it's all at the security cloud level that we are blocking things like phishing attacks. If a user clicks on a phishing link, we'll block them from accessing that phishing site. If the user has a malicious application installed on their device, we'll block traffic to that malicious application at the security cloud level. All of this has been built and designed with end user privacy in mind. Then we have our console. So it's an entirely cloud-based product. You can generate real-time reports via the console, but we also have a number of open APIs and data streams via the console where you can integrate the solution with existing security products within your current security stack. So one of those integrations that we're going to focus on just quickly here is with your UEM or your MDM, and in particular with Jamf Pro. So this flow diagram on the right-hand side is a typical example of the security outcome with both Threat Defense and Jamf Pro installed on a device. So let's say, for example, Threat Defense discovers that one of your devices has a malicious application installed on that device. The Threat Defense solution will alert the user that the application in question is malicious. It will block traffic via the security cloud to that malicious application, and it will also alert the admin team via the console that this user has a malicious application on the device. What then also can happen is that information can then be fed into Jamf Pro. Jamf Pro then can leverage some of that information to take some device action. So this could be stuff like a device wipe, or removing the application, or forcing the user to update the OS. We can also plug into conditional access, either natively or with additional security services you use, maybe within the Office 365 space, that simply states this user has a malicious application installed on their device. Do not allow access to these applications until that application has been removed or remediated. So with the combined approach, you get this complete 360 threat detection and remediation for mobile-based attacks. So prior to the acquisition from Jamf, Wandera was recognized as leaders for our mobile threat defense solution. That is continuing to be the case as well. Year on year, we're consistently either in the top right of any quadrant, but also winning awards for our security product. I'd also, for those of you that are subscribers of Gartner, I'd encourage you to check out their mobile threat defense market guide. The most recent one was this year. What they do, not only do they assess the overall market, but they this year, for example, they've also highlighted all the key functionality that a mobile threat defense solution should provide, along with very detailed description of each of this functionality. As you can see, Wandera and now Jamf received ticks across the board. So the solution is recognized as leaders, and it also delivers every single element that a mobile threat defense solution should be delivering, and some. So let's look at a couple of examples recently where the solution has helped our customers. So as I mentioned earlier on in this presentation, recently, as of September 2021, there was a big push to get devices updated, your Apple devices updated, because of this Pegasus spyware threat. So effectively what it was there was attackers were exploiting a vulnerability within the OS. In particular, it was affecting iMessage, that allowed them to silently install Pegasus spyware onto your device. Now, the first thing to note, threat defense would have protected you from any spyware that if the solution was installed on your device in the first place. So and we have a proven track record over the years of detecting and protecting against Pegasus in particular. But if we did discover any spyware installed on any of your devices, we would have alerted you of that and protected you from compromise of this type of attack in the first place. But also what we do, which in my opinion is very valuable, is we will not just alert the users that they need to update their OS every time a new version is released, but instead we alert the users when they are running a vulnerable OS. So in this case, 14.7.1 was considered vulnerable as of the day 14.8 was released, and this fix was identified and included in that OS release. Now, this is a screenshot from my app I received on the day that 14.8 was released, telling me that my OS version was vulnerable and I needed to update. So protecting me from this type of attack, albeit I had peace of mind, I would have been protected anyway because I had the solution installed on the device. But a great example of some of the device security that threat defense can provide. Then we have our internet security. So we talked about phishing as the number one threat. So what does Jamf threat defense do in response to a phishing attack? Now, if I play this out, this device on the right-hand side is going to highlight that process for you quite nicely. So what we have, the same message as earlier from Dropbox. This time, when the user clicks on a link, the site is blocked. They get a notification via the app. Within the app notification, it's a clear description as to why that site was blocked and any kind of further information the user needs to know. And they'll also be sort of informed within the application that there is a security alert on the device, so they can come back and look at that later on down the line. So that's a kind of great quick example of how the solution protects you from phishing attacks. How we do that? Now, a lot of phishing attacks generally have a shelf life of 24 hours before companies like ourselves are ultimately detecting them and taking them down. So although we do have an extensive list of all the phishing attacks we've blocked over the years, for us, we need to make sure that we're one step ahead and blocking what we call zero-day phishing attacks. So these are phishing attacks which have never been seen in the wild before, if you like. Now, what we've done is we've built our threat intelligence engine with a lot of machine learning approaches or a lot of machine learning techniques. And with phishing in particular, we have a kind of really great way of illustrating that, which you can see on the left-hand side here. So this spider diagram is plotting some of the key characteristics we look at when a URL is accessed on our network that we haven't seen before. So one of the first things we look at is whether a well-known brand has been mocked. So with Dropbox, for example, we know every URL or domain that Dropbox own or that they have distributed across their network. So if a new site is requested through one of our devices that has Dropbox within that URL, but it doesn't match up to what we know to be a genuine Dropbox site, that's going to score very highly on that brand mock component. We also know what a typical phishing site looks like. So are there any suspicious subdomains within there or any suspicious keywords? Is it using a top-level domain that's not consistent with that, with Dropbox, for example? Are there more sophisticated things at play like Punycode or Bitly, which are designed to hide or shorten the URL from the user's view? And ultimately, it hits a certain score within our algorithm. We then flag that and block that as a zero-day phishing attack. In the last 12 months alone, we've blocked over 120,000 of these zero-day phishing attacks across our customer base. Then we have conditional access. So again, I'm going to play on the right-hand side a kind of typical flow, if you like, of a user trying to access an application. on a device that has the solution enrolled. Unfortunately, as you can see through this example, and I appreciate it's quite quick there, the user was denied access to the particular application. And as we can see within the notifications here, the reason they were denied access is because their risk level exceeded the allowance in which the company has set to access the application. So we'll spend a little bit of time on this in just a second, but effectively, all of the different threats that the solution can protect you against and highlight to you can be factored into or contribute to a device risk score. So if a user has clicked on a phishing link, for example, their device suddenly becomes a medium or high risk. If the user is running an outdated OS, their device suddenly becomes a medium or high risk. You can then feed that information into any of your SaaS applications and create a policy that states, do not allow access to this SaaS application for any device that is a medium or a high risk device. And like I said, this could be done natively with our own solution or through integrations with your Microsoft, for example. Cool. So I'm going to jump onto a very quick demo just to kind of give you some further use cases and insight into the threat defense solution. Great. So this is our portal. This is a demo portal. So it's loaded with demo data, although it is a fairly accurate representation of what a typical customer sees when they use the service. Now, I'm not going to go into a full-blown product demo during this session, but of course, we're more than happy to facilitate this on a one-by-one basis. But a couple of additional functionality I want to show you. First one is what we call our App Insights report. So this is effectively how we can do some app vetting for you. This gives you insight into all the applications that are installed across your user base. Now, you can just look at the applications in isolation. You can put filters on this. So for example, you want to see all the applications that have access to your microphone, like the La Liga application I used as an example earlier. You can apply that policy and automatically see all the applications that have access to your microphone. What we also do, which in my opinion is incredibly valuable, is we give apps a risk score. Again, it's similar, high, medium, and low. Now, a high-risk application is going to be malware, and immediately you'll be notified of that fact. But also, you can see we provide you insight into medium-risk applications. Now, these are genuine applications, which, as you can see here, the likes of WhatsApp, Instagram, Chrome, are all quite mainstream and popular applications, yet we're flagging them as a security threat. Now, if we go into one of these as an example, what we are saying here is this app, WhatsApp, is not a security threat, but this version of WhatsApp is affected by a known vulnerability. So 2.18.80 was affected by a vulnerability within WhatsApp that allowed an attacker to gain access to all data and device functions to which the app has access. We'll provide a write-up whenever we discover any of these vulnerabilities and also a third-party link to the CVE. But ultimately, what we're saying here is, and if I scroll down for you, the users here have a version of WhatsApp installed in their device, which is effectively a significant vulnerability. It's allowing an attacker potentially to install spyware or malicious content onto a device through this vulnerability in WhatsApp. Now, this particular example, I know as a fact, WhatsApp were very quick to release an update. So it's, as long as users weren't running 2.18.80, they were no longer affected by this vulnerability. But ultimately, if users aren't running that or haven't updated that version, then they're going to be flagged here as a medium risk user and a medium risk device. The solution will protect you from this type of thing, as I mentioned earlier. Will protect from spyware, will alert you of any vulnerabilities here, and you can feed this information into your conditional access story. But this report is incredibly valuable to a lot of our customers to understand the risk that may exist through the applications users are using. Whilst we're in here, just to kind of give you insight again into some of the other security threats that the solution protects against, you'll get a clear breakdown of the high, medium, and low severity threats that are currently impacting your devices. As well as that, you can clearly see the sites that have been protected against, and within that, you can see the users that were protected and when they were protected from them. And just to kind of wrap things up, I'm just going to talk to you about a kind of optional integrated, not only endpoint, but network security that Jamf can provide to your mobile users. Now, mobile threat defense, as we've already talked about, is significant. It is important. Attacks are increasing year on year, particularly sort of mobile phishing attacks. We need to understand what applications users are using, what OS versions they're running, and making sure that the device itself has not been compromised. But equally as important to that is making sure that the data that is now accessible via these mobile devices is also kept secure. Now, in part, we will help you with that through our network security component, so blocking the kind of phishing attacks and the other network-based threats that we talked about. But also, there's a very kind of pertinent discussion taking place in the industry about zero trust network access. Now, my colleague Matt Vlasak is talking about our private access solution in more detail, so I'd encourage you to check his talk out, and I won't steal his thunder here. But our threat defense and private access solution, and Jamf or Wandera, as previously known, was the only company, the only solution that appears in both the Gartner Mobile Threat Defense Guide and the Gartner Zero Trust Network Access Guide. So we're the only solution that is providing both natively via one application. What we're effectively doing is not only are we providing protection on the endpoint, so we can detect and remediate endpoint threats, but also we can provide our own risk-based access control. So you effectively are getting zero trust or providing zero trust access to any data resource. Particularly on mobile devices, this is really popular amongst our customers for accessing SaaS applications. So just look at it from a slightly high level in terms of how that works. We have our application that's installed on the device. The application is performing the endpoint security that we talked about earlier. There's also an integration that we set up via with your IDP at this point, just to ensure that we can authorize the user's identity. Then the application works as a dynamic split tunnel. So when a user goes to access a business application, you as an organization define what route you want that traffic to take. Now, if it's a business application, you would send it via a private access route, where we'd apply some zero trust security to that access. So we'd look at stuff like, is this an authorized user? Are they allowed to access this application? Does the device meet the security requirements expected in order to access this application? And then connect the user to the application accordingly. For all other traffic, so general internet traffic, applications which aren't maybe owned or managed by the organization, that traffic would then just go via the usual threat defense route, where you would still get protection from the phishing attacks, the data leaks, the malware. So it's just a very unique proposition in that we can provide you with this threat defense component, this private access component, all through one easy deployed and easily managed application. So that there concludes my talk on Jamf threat defense. Thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed it.